Whoa, did you see the market this week? The Dow is down, and the Nasdaq took a huge hit.
Yeah, it's certainly causing a stir.
Yeah, we're talking double-digit drops here, and a lot of people are pointing fingers at one thing,
Tariffs.
tariffs. Those things Trump just slapped on steel and aluminum imports.
Yeah, these new tariffs on steel and aluminum are causing a lot of anxiety for sure.
So are tariffs the economic bogeyman everyone's making them out to be? Or is there something more to this story? That's what we're going to untangle today in this deep dive into this market crash.
Right.
Picture this. It's midnight, March 12th, 2025.
Okay.
Boom. A 25% tariff on all steel and aluminum imports, no matter where they're from.
Wow.
Canada, China,
Nope.
no exemptions. And the White House is claiming this is going to protect us, create jobs, but the market seems to disagree.
It's a bold move for sure. This takes the 2018 tariffs to a whole new level. And remember, this comes right after that tension with Canada over the electricity surcharge. Trump was initially going to hit them with a 50% tariff.
Okay, so the White House says these tariffs are all about national security. They say we need to protect our industries from unfair trade practices and boost domestic production. In fact, they're aiming for U.S. steel and aluminum producers to be running at 80% capacity.
Right.
And they're pointing to things like Hyundai potentially building new steel plants here as proof it's working.
That 80% capacity goal is ambitious. It really underscores the administration's commitment to revitalizing domestic manufacturing,
Okay.
but it raises important questions.
Okay.
Independent groups like the Tax Foundation are suggesting these tariffs could actually lead to job losses.
True.
We could be looking at tens of thousands of jobs lost and even a dip in our GDP.
Yeah.
And let's not forget the retaliatory tariffs other countries might impose that could cost us even more jobs.
And let's not forget about us, the everyday consumers. Remember those tariffs from 2018? Well, they led to price increases on things like canned goods because a lot of the steel used for those cans is actually imported.
Right.
Think about how many cans we use every year. Billions. So get ready for potentially higher grocery bills. And some companies might even switch to plastic, which is bad news for the environment.
It's a complex web of potential consequences. The market is already reacting to this uncertainty. Ford, General Motors, and even Tesla's stock prices took a hit. Airlines are scaling back their forecasts. On the flip side, domestic steel companies like U.S. Steel are seeing gains. This really highlights the complex ripple effects of these tariffs.
Like a roller coaster ride, isn't it?
Yeah.
Some people are cheering, some are panicking. You got folks on X celebrating Trump's protectionism, while others are warning about a potential recession. And then you have stories of people rushing to buy cars before prices potentially go up. So are these tariffs a brilliant move or a big mistake? It's a fascinating debate.
What's particularly noteworthy is the international reaction. Canada and China have already hit back with their own tariffs, and UP's considering doing the same. This raises the specter of a trade war, which could have profound consequences for the global economy. This situation, it's like a high-stakes game of economic chess. While we're all trying to decipher the winners and losers, it's important to remember that the stock market, it doesn't always mirror the real economy.
That's a really good point. I mean, we saw those drops in the Dow and the Nasdaq, but does that automatically mean a recession is looming?
Not necessarily. The market can be quite emotional, often overreacting to news, both good and bad. However, this recent dip definitely reflects the uncertainty and anxiety surrounding these tariffs.
And speaking of anxiety, I've been seeing a lot of chatter on X about how these tariffs are going to impact people's wallets.
Yeah.
They're worried about higher prices on everything from cars to groceries.
Those concerns are valid. The Tax Foundation estimates these tariffs could cost the average household an extra $625 per year.
Wow, that's not insignificant.
Yeah.
And it's not just about the direct cost of goods either, right? There's a whole ripple effect to consider.
Precisely. For instance, if companies are forced to pay more for steel and aluminum, they might need to raise prices on their products, potentially leading to inflation. Or they might have to let go of workers to cut costs, resulting in job losses.
And then there's the environmental impact to consider. If companies start swapping aluminum cans for plastic bottles, that's going to generate a lot more waste.
It's a complex web of interconnected issues with long-term consequences that are difficult to predict. But one thing is certain, these tariffs are going to have a significant impact on the lives of everyday Americans.
It sounds like there are a lot of potential downsides to these tariffs, but are there any potential upsides?
That's the key question, isn't it? The White House argues that these tariffs will ultimately strengthen the American economy by shielding domestic industries and creating jobs. They believe that compelling companies to source their steel and aluminum from within the U.S. will boost American manufacturing and foster a more resilient economy.
And there is some historical precedent for that argument. Other countries have used tariffs in the past to protect their own industries.
That's true. Protectionist policies have been employed throughout history, yielding varying degrees of success. But it's crucial to remember that each situation is unique, and what worked in the past might not work in the present. The global economy is far more interconnected than it used to be, and these tariffs could have unintended consequences that are difficult to foresee.
So there's a lot of debate about whether these tariffs will actually achieve their intended goals. Some people believe they're a necessary step to protect American jobs and industries, while others worry they'll cause more harm than good.
That's what makes this topic so compelling to explore. It's not a simple black and white issue. There are strong arguments to be made on both sides.
And it's not just an economic issue, it's a political one as well. These tariffs have already sparked tensions with some of our closest allies, such as Canada.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And those tensions could have implications for our relationships with those countries moving forward. It's a delicate balancing act, and it will be interesting to see how things play out in the long run.
Well, one thing is for sure, we're living in interesting times. These tariffs are just one example of the complex challenges facing our world today.
It's a time of great uncertainty, but also a time of great opportunity. And it's up to each of us to stay informed, engage in thoughtful dialogue, and work together to create a better future.
Before we rack up this deep dive into tariffs, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier, the market crash. We know the Dow dropped 2% this week, and the Nasdaq took an even bigger hit, down 10% from its December high. But what does that actually mean for you and me? Is this a sign of an impending recession or just a temporary blip?
That's the question everyone is asking, isn't it? It's important to remember that the stock market is not the economy. It's a reflection of investor sentiment, which can be influenced by a multitude of factors, including fear and uncertainty.
So just because the market is down, it doesn't necessarily mean the entire economy is going to tank.
Correct. There are many other economic indicators we need to consider to get a comprehensive understanding of the health of the economy. Things like unemployment rates, consumer spending, and business investment.
So we shouldn't panic just yet.
Panic is never a productive strategy. However, it is important to be aware of the potential risks and to make informed decisions. If you're concerned about the impact of these tariffs on your personal finances, consulting a financial advisor is a wise move.
Good advice. Speaking of advice, what would you say to people who are worried about the potential for a trade war?
I would emphasize that trade wars are never beneficial for anyone involved. They
Oh.
disrupt global supply chains, lead to higher prices for consumers, and can damage relationships between countries.
So what can we do to prevent a trade war?
First and foremost, we need open and honest dialogue with our trading partners. We need to understand each other's concerns and work together to find solutions that benefit everyone.
That sounds like a tall order in today's political climate.
It is a challenge, but not an insurmountable one. We must remember that we are all interconnected and that cooperation is essential for a healthy global economy.
Well said. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in our deep dive into tariffs and this market turmoil. We've talked about the White House's rationale, the potential impacts, both good and bad, and the global reaction. But one question lingers. Will these tariffs really make America stronger in the long run?
Well, it's a gamble, there's no doubt about that. And it's one that's dividing economists and everyday Americans alike.
Yeah, it's interesting though, isn't it? The White House seems convinced that any short-term pain will be worth it for the long-term gain. They seem to believe these tariffs are like a necessary shock to the system.
Yeah, they're betting that by making imported steel and aluminum more expensive, domestic producers will have the breathing room they need to ramp up production and innovation. It's a bold strategy, one that aims to reshape global trade and bring back those manufacturing jobs we've heard so much about.
And it's not just about steel and aluminum, right? This feels like part of a bigger push to rewrite the rules of global trade, especially when it comes to China.
Absolutely. These tariffs are a piece of a larger puzzle, a protectionist approach aimed at what the administration sees as unfair trade practices. The question is, can we really turn back the clock and become a manufacturing powerhouse again in today's interconnected world?
Right, so are we on the cusp of a manufacturing renaissance? Or are we headed for an economic showdown with unpredictable consequences?
It's a high-stakes game, and it's hard to predict who will blink first. On one hand, there's the potential for job growth and a resurgence of American manufacturing. On the other hand, we're facing the very real possibility of a trade war, rising prices for consumers, and global instability.
It's a lot to process.
Hmm.
What advice would you give to someone trying to make sense of it all?
I'd say stay informed, stay engaged, and don't be afraid to ask tough questions. This is a debate that affects all of us. We need to understand the arguments, weigh the potential costs and benefits, and make our voices heard.
Because in the end, these aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. We're talking about people's livelihoods, their families, their futures.
Exactly. That's precisely why this deep dive has been so important. We've delved into the complexities, highlighted the controversies, and encouraged you to think critically.
So as we wrap up, we want to leave you with this. What do you think? Are these tariffs a path to a stronger America, or are they a dangerous gamble? Head over to our X and let us know.
We're eager to hear your perspective. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.